Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson, and as October draws in and Halloween draws near, one of our Isle of Man episodes, containing a witch, which was originally written by Sophia Morrison and was recorded into the public domain by Andrew Calvio, thanks to Andrew and all the people at LibriVox. After the story, I'll be popping up with a few observations and plot hooks.
The Witch of Slieu, Whallian. It was midsummer day, and the peel herring fleet, with sails half set, was ready for sea. The men had their barley sown, and their potatoes down, and now their boats were rigged and nets stowed on board, and they were ready for the harvest of the sea. It was a fine day. The sky was clear, and the wind was in the right airt, being from the north. But, as they say, if custom will not get custom, custom will weep. A basin full of water was brought from the holy well and given to the wise woman that sold fair winds, as she stood on the harbor side with the women and children to watch the boats off. They told her to look, and to tell of the luck of the herring fleet. She bent over the water, and, as she looked, her face grew pale with fear, and she gasped, "Hurroos, hurroos, and do ye know what I'm seeing?" "Let us hear," said they. "I'm seeing the wild waves lashed to a foam away by the great Brada head. I'm seeing the surge round the Chicken's Rock, and the breaker lip is red. I'm seeing where corpses toss in the sound, with nets and gears and spars. And never a one of the fishing fleet is riding under the stars." There was a dead hush, and the men gathered close together, muttering, till Gory, the admiral of the fishing fleet, stepped forward, caught the basin out of her hands, and flung it out to sea, growling, sure as I'm alive, woman. I've more than half a mind to heave you in after it. If I had my way, the like of you and your crew would be run into the sea. Boys, we're going to lose a shot for that bleb. Come on, let's go and chance it with the help of God. Aye, no herring, no wedding. Let's go and chance it, said young Cassian. So, hoisting sails, they left the port, and when the land was fairly opened out, so that they could see the calf, they headed for the south, and stood out for the shoulder. Soon a fine breeze put them in a fishing ground, and every man was looking for signs of herring, perkins, gannets, fish playing on the surface, oily water, and such like. When the sun was set, and the evening was too dark to see the admiral's flag, the skipper of each lugger held his arm out at full length, and when he could no longer see the black in his thumbnail, he ordered the men to shoot their nets. And as they lay to their trains, it all fell out as the witch said. Soon the sea put on another face. The wind from westward blew a sudden gale and swelled up the waves with foam. The boats were driven hither and thither, and the anchors dragged quickly behind them. The men hoisted sail before the wind and struggled to get back to land, and the lightning was all the light they had. It was so black dark that they could see no hill, and above the uproar of the sea they could hear the surges pounding on the rocky coast. The waves were rising like mountains, breaking over the boats, and harrying them from stem to stern. They were dashed to pieces on the rocks of the calf, and only 2 men escaped with their lives. But there was one boat that had got safe back to port before the storm, and that was the boat of the 7 boys. She was a Dalby boat, and belonged to 7 young men who were all unmarried. They were always good to the Duany Mary, the merman, and when they were hauling their nets, they would throw him a fishful of herring, and in return they always had good luck with their fishing. This night, after the fleet had shot their nets some time, the night being still fine and calm, the 7 boys heard the voice of the merman hailing them, and saying, "It is calm and fine now. There will be storm soon enough." When the skipper heard this, he said, "Every herring must hang by its own gills." And he and his crew at once put their nets on the board, and gained the harbor. And it was given for law ever after, that no crew was to be made up of single men only. There was to be at least 1 married man on board, and no man was bound by his hiring to fish in the same South Sea, which was called the Sea of Blood from that day. As for the witch, They said that she had raised the storm by her spells, and they took her to the top of the great mountain, Whallian, put her into a spiked barrel, and rolled her from the top to the bottom, where the barrel sank into the bog. For many and many a long year there was a bare track down the steep mountainside, where grass would never grow, nor ling nor gorse. They called it the Witch's Way, and they say that her screams are heard in the air every year on the day that she was put to death.
And now to unpack some plot hooks. First, you'll notice that the witch divines using water from the holy well. This isn't unusual in Celtic areas. You see similar things in Cornwall. It may seem strange in the standard Hermetic setting for holy places to produce what we would recognise as viz, and yet throughout Celtic charming, it is extremely common for folk magicians to pray or use holy objects or invoke angels or otherwise call on the divine. Does this witch have the vision's virtue? Or is she casting sailor's foretaste of the morrow? Or is she simply lying and then using her charms to make her lies true? Something we saw in another predictor in the Tales from a Chinese Studio by Su Long Pu last year. It says she's a witch who sells fair winds. Now, I'm not sure what this means in a Manx context. If we were having a look at one of our Cornish folk tales and we had a witch who sold fair winds, what that would mean is that when a fair wind was blowing, she would climb to the top of a cliff, tie 3 knots in a handkerchief or a rope, and then would sell that rope so that when a sailor needs the wind, when he is becalmed, he can undo one of the knots to create a breeze. Again, this is a minor folk charm. It's not clear to me why having a married man in each boat increases the likelihood of all the boats coming home, given that the boat that came home is full of unmarried men. I presume it's an attempt to use either the blessing of the sacrament of marriage or the true love virtue to bring the man back to his wife. Alternatively, it could just be that married men take fewer risks. At the start, they talk about no herring, no wedding. That is, poor men can't get married. Married men are a little bit more financially stable. They don't need to take dramatic risks to win a wife, and therefore their cool heads may bring the entire boat home. But to me, that point's not absolutely clear. It does seem like weaponizing miracles. Can you do the same thing with your grog turb, for example? Putting a witch in a spiked barrel and rolling her down a hill has been the traditional way of destroying witches in Man since pre-Christian times. It used to happen on hills that were dedicated to the god Thor, and I believe that this type of hill, now a Hill of St. John, is where the Parliament of the Isle of Man still meets. I am not sure if these are meant to be the same 2 hills. It means that the hill she was rolled down, either because it is sacred to St. John, has a divine aura, or because St. John is used pretty much wherever you want to use fairy power. For example, the eve of St. John is an equinox. Whether it's still, in some sense, a human sacrifice to Thor, and therefore a source of great fairy power. The Witch's Way creates a scar in the land, which may be infernal, and her screams are heard annually. Now, I've been playing a lot of Fallen London in the last 6 months, and in Fallen London, wild words are one of the categories of treasure. Primordial shrieks, aeolian screams, night whispers. So I wonder if the witch's screams can be trapped in a bottle and used as mentum vis. It may, of course, be infernally tainted. In my saga it would be, but your saga may vary.